Hello everyone, welcome to this higher photography virtual video thingamajig. I'm going to go through, that is the official title. I'm going to go through the exam paper for 2023 and I am going to show you the questions, show you what they look like, and then go over the answers. I think the best thing that you could do for this is if you try and answer the questions as you go through it, and then I'll reveal the answer one by one, but try and do it and then you can check your answers in real time. Yeah, I'll go through it and then hopefully you'll have a better understanding of what the exam paper looks like. So the higher photography exam is a structured paper, which means that you write in the booklet. Additional paper can be made available if you need it. And you can see the front of the paper, you've just got the normal things that you need to fill in. You might want to find out what your candidate number is if you don't know what that is yet. It's a good idea. So, the structure of the paper is we have 10 multiple choice questions. Make sure you answer them all. If you don't know the answer, hazard your best guess. But yeah, 10 questions, multiple choice. And then question 11, which is normally broken up into A, B, C and D. And question 12 is an open question worth 10 marks, where you have to write about technical and creative factors within an image. The image here is quite small, but you will be given a supplementary sheet where you are given larger images, which is very helpful. But I will go through this paper. So for the first question here, you're being asked an aperture question. So it says, which image was taken using the highest F number? Okay, so if you can try and answer that just now, if we do these like A, B, C and D, that would probably be the easiest way. I'm just from left to right, so you know, the portrait would be A, the train would be B, the hay bales would be C, and the glasses would be D. So if you can just go for that one. I think this one's quite obvious, but yeah. And then I'll go over the answer just now. So I'll do this kind of one by one, and you can tell me what you think the answer is. So for this question, the correct answer is C. That's the image with the hay bales. How do I know that's the answer? I have the mark scheme in front of me. No, it's not because of that. It's because a high F number means a small aperture. And if you look at that photograph, you can see that there's an extended depth of field, so the image is sharp from the foreground all the way through to the background. You can achieve extended or wide depths of field by using small apertures. The smaller the aperture, the higher the F number. So for an image like this, you know, you'd be talking maybe f22, f16, around about that, to get that extended depth of field. The rest of the images are taken with larger apertures, because there's a more limited depth of field within those images. So question number 2, okay. The photographer took the following images using a setting that automatically captures multiple images at different exposures. What is this setting called? So you have 4 options again. You've got auto bracketing, landscape mode, shutter speed, and white balance. So which of those settings would be used to create the same image at different exposures? So if you want to try and answer that one. So interestingly, this one wasn't done very well, which I found quite surprising. But the correct answer for that one is auto bracketing. So on the auto bracket setting, you can set it to +2 or -2, or +1 and -1. And the first image that you take will be the correct exposure, which will, if you put the exposure into the center. The second image will be 1 or 2 stops brighter, and the third image will be 1 or 2 stops darker. And that's how you get that auto bracketing technique. It's useful for if you want to do landscape photography, because sometimes the sky can be overexposed, and it means that you can exposure stack your images in Photoshop, which is a very cool thing to do. Question 3. Which of the following best represents a shutter speed of a 2,000th of a second? Okay, so which image? So you have this figure here. You've got 4 versions of the figure. Which one would have been used? Which image best represents 2,000th of a second? Okay. That's the bell. So the correct one for that is the 4th one. Okay, so it's the figure that looks sharp, or the figure that doesn't have motion blur. Yeah, so you can see each of these images has motion blur. I'm guessing, like a slower shutter speed's been used for those. So the one that's been used on the fast 2,000th of a second is the one which is doesn't have any motion blur. Okay, on to number 4. A photographer uses a DSLR camera in manual mode, adds a neutral density filter to their lens. Is that written well, or is it just the way I'm reading it? Maybe and adds? No. Yeah. I don't know. I'm reading this really badly. If the lighting conditions stay the same, which of the following adjustments would ensure that the exposure is unchanged? Okay, right. So they are taking a photograph and they're using a neutral density filter on the lens. Okay. It's called an ND filter as well. If the lighting conditions stay the same, which of the following adjustments would ensure that the exposure is unchanged? So if you can have a look at that question, that's quite a hard question, okay? I'm going to be honest with that one. It's quite wordy. So if you ever get a question like that, it's quite a good idea to sort of underline the key things within the question, which will maybe help you get the correct answer. So give it a shot and I will explain the answer in a moment. I'll give you a little bit longer on this one just to read it through and get an idea of what the correct answer is. Okay, so the correct answer for that one is increase the ISO number. So that would be the only option there, which would counteract the putting a neutral density filter onto the lens. So remember, a neutral density filter allows you to use longer shutter speeds when you take an image. So you can place a neutral density filter onto your lens, and it's almost like sunglasses for your lens. So it will diffuse the light which is hitting the sensor. So if we used a faster shutter speed, that would just make the image darker. Increasing the ISO, we're making the sensor more sensitive to light because we've got sunglasses on our lens. So if we increase the sensitivity of the sensor, then it means that we can get a correct exposure. So that's why that is the answer. Obviously, if we closed the aperture down, we would be making the image darker again, which we wouldn't want to do because we've placed a ND filter on the lens. And the last one, decrease the EV number. Again, that's going to make the image darker. So yeah, so within that instance, if we're putting an ND filter onto the lens, we would need to use a slower shutter speed, make the aperture bigger, or increase the ISO number. So yeah, so it's sunglasses. It's gonna mean that we need more. We need more light to hit the sensor, or the sensor to be more sensitive to light. Hope that makes sense. It's quite a hard question, but yeah. The next one is an interesting question when this came up. I was kind of like surprised that this one was in the exam, but I think it's a very good question to have. Which diagram illustrates the exposure triangle? So yeah, good. I think it's quite a good question because it sort of it's a fundamental thing that you should know about, and you should know what apertures are, you should know what shutter speeds are, and you should know what ISO numbers are. But if you can try and do that one just now. Okay, now hopefully you've had a chance to do that one. Right, so if you look at the different diagrams, the correct answer is C, yeah? If we're going, A, B, C, D, it's this one here is the right answer. I thought zooming in was a good idea there. So you've got shutter speed is measured normally in fractions of seconds or seconds, but normally fractions. So we've got 125th, a 60th, a 30th, half a second, so forth. Yeah, we've got the ISO numbers which double, so that's the sensitivity of the sensor. We've got 100, 200, 400, 800, and at the bottom we have the aperture numbers. Remember, the aperture is the hole in the lens that the light travels through. So we've got large aperture is f2.4, and then small aperture is f22. Yeah, so hopefully that bit makes sense. I'll move on. What information is represented in a histogram? Okay, I'll give you a second to have a think about that one. So what information is represented in a histogram? Okay. Right, so hopefully you've had a chance to look at that. Again, we have been using histograms in lessons, so you should have an idea. Now the correct answer for that is tonal range. Okay, so a histogram is measuring light and dark within an image. So, when you open up an image in Photoshop, you may go to levels and you may look at your histogram and see, the different tones within the photograph. That's the highlights, the shadows, and the midtones. Okay. Digital noise, that's controlled by ISO. File size or resolution, that's controlled by the image sensor, editing, all sorts of things. And color casts, that's when you use your white balance. So the correct answer for there is tonal range, or A, depending on how you're writing this down. Okay, we're getting through this quite quickly. Number 7. The photographer selected a white balance setting to accurately represent the colours in this scene. Alright, so again, white balance questions. Okay, now interestingly, this one had a little bit of a debate about it, this question. If you get a question like this, I don't want to give away the answer, so if you can try and answer it just now, and then we'll have a wee chat about it after. So if you just want to take a couple of minutes to try and answer that one. Okay, so which white balance setting was used? So I'm guessing that most of you probably would have guessed sunny or cloudy. Yeah, if we were doing Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, it would be a 50-50 choice, and it would leave those two just to make it extra difficult. So now I'm just going to zoom in here. Right, because in the sky there is mainly clouds. We have got the sun, but we've mainly got clouds. Okay, so the right answer for that one is cloudy. Now, when you get a white balance question, just think about the situation. Think about the light within the image. Okay, that sounded very vague. So if a photograph is taken outside, normally we're going to be talking about sunny or cloudy. Could potentially be flash, if the photographers use lots of flash lights, or fluorescent if they've done the same, but 9 times out of 10 we're going to be talking about cloudy or sunny if it's outdoors. So just be careful with that one. Okay, now remember, because there's blue and orange colours within the image, that does not mean that it's a colour cast. Okay, so when you're looking at an image like this, you can see that the sign that says eating house is white. Okay, now the fact that that is white shows you that there is no colour cast within the picture. All right, so don't get confused with colour casts and colour itself. Just be wary of that one. But yeah, in that image, you know, there's no colour cast at all. The cloudy white balance setting would be used. Cloudy white balance setting will neutralise any potential blue or cool colour casts, so it warms up the tones within an image. So yeah, so that one, the right answer is cloudy. Number 8, okay, it's a nice question. When diffusing incident light, the shadows will be more. Okay, so we have got there's a lighting PowerPoint which you should read, and this will help you with this answer. So diffused light, diffusing something. Okay, so have a little think about that one. Okay, now the correct answer to that is softened. All right, so diffused light is normally in the form of using a softbox on a light, okay, a studio light. So you put the softbox on the top of it and it diffuses the light that comes out. However, diffused light could also be light coming through a window as well. So anything that kind of diffuses the light, it could be classed as a diffuser. But diffused, if you think about light as going through something, it is being softened. Okay, so the highlights, the shadows are going to be softer in the image. Okay, so that's the answer to that one. Now the next question is about focal length. So a photographer is taking images of a landscape scene with mountains in the distance. They use a specific lens to make the mountains appear closer to the foreground than they actually are. Okay, so the mountains are far away. They're using a particular lens to bring those mountains a bit closer in, not physically. Which lens would give this effect? Okay, so again, I don't want to give the answer away here, but have a think. And as I said, if you can write the answers, and then I'll go through the answer. This is probably the best way to get something out of this. Okay, so the answer to that question is telephoto. All right. So if you use a telephoto lens, you zoom in. Okay. So you go from a short to a long focal length. So you zoom in. Yeah. So telephoto. Okay, so they've not said telezoom there, they've said telephoto, which is interesting. Which is clever, because I think telezoom would give away the answer. So a macro lens, that's when you're photographing things that are very, very close up. Okay. And they, not all the time, but a lot of the time, they're prime lenses, so they don't really zoom in or out. A wide angle lens, that's the opposite. That's when you want a wide angle shot of a scene, so it'd be like a landscape. That'd be something like a 10mm lens, for example. A telephoto lens, that's, you know, normally you're talking about a 200mm or 300mm lens, where you can zoom in to that focal length. And then a standard lens is your, you know, 18 to 55mm lens, which you get with your camera. You can zoom in on them, but you're not going to bring the mountains of a landscape scene that much closer at 55mm. But yeah, that's that. The answer to that one. Right, now the next one, again, this is an interesting question. You're being asked to choose from the table. You've got image 1 of this cool guy with his sunglasses on, and then you've got image 2 of this cool guy slightly brighter with his sunglasses on. So which row in the table shows the 2 changes that the photographer made So they do this a lot within the multiple choice. They'll show you one image and they'll say, what did the photographer do to change to image 2? Again, I'll give you a little bit longer on this one because it's quite you know, there's a lot of information to think about there. So have a little think and look. Okay, so tricky question. All right. Again, this was, you know, that was answered. It was okay within the exam, but you know, some people struggled with it. So which row in the table shows the two changes that the photographer? I need to say two changes. Yeah, doing these voiceovers can be tricky. So the right answer is raise the EV number to +2 and then increase the contrast. Okay, so image 2 is brighter. So EV means exposure value, so we're adding 2 to that. Okay, so we're making it 2 stops brighter. So EV +1. If the image got darker, it'd be EV -2, so forth. Yeah. So that one is right, and the contrast has increased because the highlights are brighter, and the shadows are darker. So the contrast between shadow and highlights been enhanced. You know, the first one, it says change to a faster shutter speed. Now, if you use a faster shutter speed, your image is going to get darker. Okay. So that would make image 2 darker than image 1. Increase the saturation. The saturation's not been changed there at all. So the colours in the image are the same. If the saturation's been changed, normally the colours are a lot more intense. Yeah. You've got select a smaller aperture. Again, if you took image 1 and then you made the aperture smaller, image 2 would be darker, because less light's hitting the sensor. Adjusted the white balance, nope. So the white balance has not been changed. Okay, so again, you might think, oh, there's a colour cast on these images, but I think it's more the photographers used gels to create this effect. Decrease the ISO number. Again, if you took image 1 and then you made the ISO lower, image 2 would be darker. Reduce the brightness, well, no, because image 2 is brighter. So yeah, so the right answer is the last one. Okay, so just, if you get a question like that, just take your time. I think with those types of questions, you know, there's a lot of words on there. You know, it's not just A, B, C, D. It's, you know, and it's tables, and it can be a little bit confusing. So take your time with those kind of questions that are a little bit more sort of challenging. So yeah, I'm gonna pause the video now before I do the next question, because I want to make sure it's worked. But I hope that has been useful for the first section, and yeah, we'll see how we get on with section 2. Okay, so I will now go through question 11. Section 2, it says attempt both questions. Within question 11, as I said, you're given an image, and then you're given 11A, B, C, and D. So question 11 is broken up into 4 parts, and each question is in response to this picture. So you've got new orders, number 1, okay, which was taken in 2018 by Ori Gersh. That's my guess at the name. I'm sure it's totally incorrect, but there we go. Right, so we've got this image here. Now we're being asked, 11A, identify one specific camera control the photographer could have used to capture this image. Okay, so we're being taught, for this question, we're being asked about a camera control. So that is something that you are controlling on the camera. When you get a question like that, just read it through and make sure that you're writing about the right thing. Sometimes kids will write about the wrong thing, and then they obviously can't get any marks. So for this question, you're given 1 mark just for saying the camera control. Okay, and then you're given a mark, and this is really important that you get this, explain the effect of the camera control on the image. So it's the effect on the picture itself. It's not just what camera control was used, and you must refer to the photograph. Okay, now it's a 2 mark question, 1 mark for what camera control, 1 mark for how it is affecting the picture. So if you want to take a little bit of time just now to answer the question and then see how you get on, you can, I think with these questions what's probably best to do is try and answer it and then pause the video, and then I will go through an explanation. So if you just pause now, do the answer, and then I'll give I'll go do a bit of a walkthrough. Okay, so for this question, I'm going to use a mark scheme for this one. I'm going to use it for all these questions just to help you, and then I might, refer to other things. So 11A. Now, as I said, camera controls is things like shutter speed, ISO, white balance, okay, aperture, using the camera itself. So it's a camera control. It could be EV +1, auto bracketing, that kind of thing. But we're talking about a control on the camera specifically. Okay, so you don't want to be talking about studio lights. You don't want to be talking about compositional things. It's just purely a camera function. So think back to when you were learning to use a camera, so you had all the different functions. That's the kind of stuff we're looking for. So I think that I would say the most obvious one here, and I'm guessing some of you probably wrote the fact that a fast shutter speed's been used. So you would get a mark just for putting shutter speed, but you probably want to put fast shutter speed, but as I said, you get a mark for identifying the camera control. Okay, now again, as I said before, you must refer to the photo. So it's really, really important. So an example answer: a fast shutter speed has been used to freeze the movement of the water or exploding mug. Now, I'm just going to be really specific here. If you're talking about fast shutter speed, we need to talk about freezing motion. Okay? If you said it captures the motion of the water in the exploding mug, you wouldn't get a mark, because the word capture is quite subjective. So you could capture the water at slow shutter speed. So if you're talking about fast shutter speed, you must talk about freezing the motion, okay, or freezing the movement, okay, stopping the movement in time. The next one that we've got is ISO. All right, so you could talk about ISO within this image. Obviously, you could write about aperture. I think this one's actually quite difficult to write about aperture for, because there's not much of a background. So in terms of the depth of field, it can be that's a tricky one. So sometimes think to yourself, what's the easiest camera function I can refer to here to help me get the marks? So a high ISO setting has been used to balance exposure, because the photographer has used a fast shutter speed to capture the cup breaking. Okay, so again, there is reference to the image there. So the photographers had to put the ISO up, yeah, because they are using a fast shutter speed, which we're talking about compensating. So if I'm using if a photographer is using a slower shutter speed for that picture, they could keep the ISO relatively low. Because lots of light is going through the aperture and hitting the sensor for a long duration. But within this image, we're thinking that the photographer's using a really fast shutter speed, so they're going to have to put that ISO up a bit in order to capture a exposed image, a correctly exposed image. So yeah, hopefully that makes sense. You've also got things like, preset mode, and I like the fact that, you know, the SQA have put this this answer in, because it is a camera control, you know. So a preset sports mode has been used to create a fast shutter speed to freeze the movement of the exploding mug. So great. You know, you could even refer to something like a semi-automatic mode like TV time value, and using a fast shutter speed on that setting in order to, you know, freeze the motion of the water. Again, we're talking about freezing movement. We're not just talking about capturing it. So it's really important that you refer to that in the correct way. So 11B is an equipment question. So again, we need to be, you know, we need to think about, we're talking about equipment here. Quite a challenging question. You know, you're being asked to identify 3 pieces of equipment that could be used, and then explain the effect of each piece of equipment on that image itself. So yeah, quite a tricky one. I'll let you have a, oh no, if you just pause just now, do the answer, and then I'll go through the answers just now. Okay, so again, we're looking at this picture and we're thinking, you know, what's been used? So, you know, the first thing that we could maybe say that, you know, within most still life photography, a tripod's going to be used. So we've got the answer here from the SQ8, and this is an interesting answer. A tripod may have been used to pre-compose the shot to allow the photographer to drop the cup in the centre of the frame at the same time as taking the photo. So that, again, that's quite an interesting one. So the photographer, you know, has set the camera up on the tripod and has dropped the mug, and, you know, taken the photo at a specific time. So we're assuming that the photographer's working alone when they've taken that photograph. So yeah, that could be an answer. Again, with this answer, they are referring to the picture. So it's really important that you refer to that specific image. Don't give an answer which is just generic, and it could be for any image. You must refer to the photograph. Okay, so I'm just going to go through a few of these things here on the mark scheme, but you can you can have a look at the mark schemes as well, which is really useful. Now the next one that I'm going to talk about is, you know, using a remote shutter. So a remote shutter is when you can take a photograph without touching the shutter button, so without touching the camera. And I'm guessing that the photographer would have done that in this instance, because they're dropping a mug. They could potentially be, you know, pushing a remote, which would, you know, take the photograph when at the precise moment that the mug drops. Okay, so a remote shutter release may be used so that the photographer can be closer to the still life to drop the cup while taking a photo. Yeah, and even the angle of the photograph, you know, the photographer maybe wants to be above, dropping the cup and then pushing the button as it's dropping. They're not going to be able to, they're going to have enough time to get back to the camera. So yeah, so I think that the tripod and the remote shutter are the kind of 2 obvious ones there. And then a third one, and I'm including this one because it's quite simple, but it gets a mark. Now, a black backdrop is a piece of equipment. So if you look at this picture, you see that, you know, it looks like the object is on a table against a black background. So it may have been used to make the lighter object stand out against the dark. So again, really simple. Yeah, so it's the cause and effect. Black backdrop makes white object stand out against black. Great. So really simple. But for that question, we're looking for 3 marks. Other things that were mentioned, a reflector, studio light, remote shutter. Again, remote shutter, you know, could be explained for like safety. You know, the fact that, you know, you're dropping glass, you don't want to be close to that, so it allows the photographer to be further away. And then a diffuser, so yeah, using a softbox, because you can see that the shadows are very soft within this image. You know, the shadows on the petals are really soft, and on the broken glass. It's not glass, it's ceramic, Mr. Stafford. Yep, so that's that one, 11B. We will move on to 11C. Okay, so explain how the photographer has used free compositional techniques for creative effect in this image. So again, we need to make sure that we're writing about composition. And again, it's the creative effect on the image. So what is the effect of that compositional technique on the picture? So make sure that you're writing about that. So if you want to pause, try this question and then see how you get on. With these, if you want to have the image up larger, you can download this paper from the SQA website. So right, so the ones we've got a few answers that we can give here. I will go back to the image when I'm going through. So we're talking about composition. So composition is things like framing, leading lines, negative space, rule of thirds, those kind of things. Vantage point, so forth. So again, I'm gonna talk about a few things here, rather than doing them all. And I'm just gonna do a few answers, okay? Now, obviously, there is other things. You could talk about leading lines here. You could definitely talk about negative space and so forth. But I'm just gonna speak about a few. So you've got a really simple one for vantage point. You've got the camera is positioned lower so that the action of the splashing water appears larger to the viewer. Okay, so that there's a cause and effect there. Camera's lower, low vantage point, is the cause, and the effect, it makes the splashing water appear bigger. So cause and effect. Okay. Next one, you've got the pink flower is the centre of interest as it is the only use of colour within the scene, which draws the viewer's eye to it. So that's a point about focal point. So again, pink flower, centre of interest, viewer's eye is drawn towards it. So cause and effect gets the mark. Triangular composition has been used. The viewer's attention is drawn from the flower up to the water, across the shattered fragments, allowing the viewer to see the whole scene. So you've got that rule of triangles, okay? And in fact, if you just look at this image, and when you get the bigger image, if you can draw lines on it, if you can draw a triangle on it, then that's the rule of triangles that's been used. And as long as you can argue that it's been used, then you will get the marks. So that is invariably making the audience's eye travel between the different elements of the image and then subsequently they take in the whole picture. Okay. Rule of thirds. So I'll go over this one because that's something that candidates often struggle writing about. Now you've got the photographer has used rule of thirds as the flower sits on the left hand intersection. Okay, drawing the viewer's attention to the left. All right, so rule of thirds is used. We're saying where it's being used. Okay, so left intersection, and it draws the viewer's attention to that part of the image. And you could say that helps the flower become the focal point as well. So you could go further with that answer. And we'll move on to question D now. Obviously, you can do this at your own pace. Question D, explain how the photographer has used subject matter to create mood and atmosphere in this image. I was really pleased to see this question because it's a question that's normally in art exams, but I was really pleased to see this in the photography exam. So mood and atmosphere, it can be quite a difficult question to answer, but just look at the image, think about what mood is created. Make sure that you refer to the picture. Okay. Again, pause the video just now and then try the answer, and then I'll go through the answer with you. Okay, so different things that we can talk about here. So if you haven't really looked at mood and atmosphere before, there will be there's PowerPoints on Google Classroom that you can look through that. I think when you look at an image, if you're going to talk about mood and atmosphere, just first of all look at the image and just think, how does this make me feel? What is the kind of, you know, is it happy, is it sad, is it dramatic, is it calming, all those kind of things. This question's quite sort of subjective as well, because, you know, different people read images in a different way. Someone might look at this image and think, you know, it's very calming, you know, and as long as they can justify that, that's fine. However, you know, I'm guessing most people wouldn't think that. So, the many shards of the exploding cup create a sense of chaos and destruction. Yeah, so, you know, we're getting a smashed mug. Okay. You've got a sad mood has been suggested as the cup has exploded, leaving the flower without water to survive. All right, so there's this kind of, like, you know, narrative going on. You've got the force used to shatter the cup conveys a violent atmosphere. So yeah, that violence. So within the mark scheme, it's quite good to look at these answers because they're very concise. Okay, so we're not rambling on for paragraphs, which you don't have the time to do. Just try and refer to the image, tell me what the atmosphere is. Okay, all right, so, you know, it could be calm because the, you know, the water's kind of swooping and flowing up and downward. Right, as long as you're explaining it in your own way, then you will get the marks for that one. So you're looking for 2 marks for that question. Okay, so 2 points, 2 separate points. So I hope you have done well with that section. Now we will move on to the final question. I'm just going to do this in one swoop. So question 12, okay, this is worth 10 marks. You've got this image by Julian Germain, which was taken in 2005. It's got a very long but very poignant title. For every minute you are angry, you lose 60 seconds of happiness. So there's a little lesson in there itself. And we've got this image of this elderly person who is cooking, I'm guessing, and there is nice warm food on the table. And yeah, take a little bit of time, if you've got it, to look at the image and just get a kind of sense of it before you start answering it. But I quite like this picture. I think there's quite a lot you can talk about. So you're being asked to write technical and creative factors which the photographer would have considered when setting up the shot. So things that the photographer, you know, is thinking about and deciding to do, and the choices that they're making. Now with this question, you must refer to technical and creative at least once. So, you know, in theory you could do, you know, 9 for technical and 1 for creative, but, you know, I'm guessing that most of you would refer to both, you know, maybe in equal measure, or 6 and 4 or so forth. So again, pause the video just now and then I will go through some answers. I'm just going to pick a few of them and then you can sort of check. Remember, for this question you must do point, example, explain. Okay, so you make a point, then refer to the image, and then talk about impact. The impact is the most important bit. So what is the impact of that particular device or decision by the photographer on how an audience would read the image? Okay, so hopefully you've paused that and you have had a think about that question. And as I said again, it must be point, example, explain. So let's go through a few answers. So I'm going to start with aperture, just because that's quite a sort of simple one to talk about, I would say. Now, you know, looking at these SQA ones, you know, they're quite, you know, they're very impressive. But as long as you do that technical point, example, impact, then you will get the marks. So we've got, you know, a large aperture, a low F number, has been selected to create a shallow depth of field. Okay, or limited depth of field, however you want to describe it. This draws the viewer's attention to the plate of food on the table in the foreground, allowing the viewer to follow the narrative. Okay, so that is the impact. You know, we're drawn into this kind of this narrative of this man's cooking food. The warm food's placed on the table, and the aperture is kind of doing that. It's allowing us to sort of, to sit at the table, focus on the food, and it puts the focus on that meal on the table as being like the kind of forefront of the picture. But again, that answer has got the 3 prongs in it. We've got the large aperture, draws the attention to the plate of food, allowing the viewer to follow the narrative. So if you use your fingers, 1, 2, 3, and I don't mean to sound patronising, but when I mark, that's what I do with my fingers. I think I've done that, I've said that, and then they've not really done the impact. So make sure you do the 3. Okay. Now I'll go through a few things, okay, from this. But we've got the photographer has used a daylight white balance setting, all right, as the light source could be daylight coming from a window on the right hand side. So it does look like that. It looks like light is coming from the right and landing on the table. You can tell the direction of light's coming in through the shadows are going to the left of the objects. From the right hand side, this makes the bowls and plates on the table appear true to life as the photographer saw it. Okay, so that's a good answer there. We're talking about the photographer has used the white balance setting, the daylight setting. Yeah, we're explaining how we know that. Okay, and then we're taught the impact is it's the image is true to life. We don't have a blue colour cast on our picture, which we may have had if the daylight white balance setting wasn't used. So it's very again, we've got that 3-prong answer. Again, you might want to go further with that. You may have wanted to talk about the blue colour cast being neutralised, but the key thing is that you talk about, you refer to an example. So this makes the bowls and plates on the table appear true to life. If you said this makes the picture appear true to life, you're not going to get a mark. So it's that example that's very important. Someone's put the photographer could have used portrait preset mode. Again, it's good to learn these preset modes, okay, to capture the action quickly before the man turned round. This created a candid record of the moment, right? So when you're doing candid photography, a lot of the time you may be using semi-automatic modes. So, I'm always going on about use TV, 125th, be there, push the button. And there's nothing wrong with that. So photographers use that mode. It captures the action quickly, so before the man turned round. Okay, so the key bit in there is that before the man turned round. We're referring to the image, we're not just talking about any picture. Impact, this creates a candid record of the moment, so it looks like we are a kind of voyeur, looking at this man, cooking his tea, and it looks like, he's not posing. So we have that sort of candid feel to it. Okay. Now we've got our sort of visual element answers as well. So what's great about this question is we can talk about anything. We can talk about camera functions, we can talk about equipment, we can talk about setting, we can talk about visual elements, which is line, tone, shape, colour, texture. We can talk about all these things. So for texture, you've got, a rough texture of the worn placemat suggests that this is one of the many meals served at this table. This gives the impression that it has been well used and familiar, providing a sense of contentment. Okay, so yeah, the rough texture, it also makes the place look old, which kind of ties in with the, the elderly person. So the impact of that is, we feel that we're in a very lived-in environment, a place which has been around for a long time. These objects have been around for a long time. And it's amazing how a rugged texture can kind of make you think that. I'm even thinking about the table, that I'm currently, that my iPad's currently on. I'm now thinking about that. There's lots of scrapes and scores and marks on that table, which is almost like a bit of a history. So this image sort of shows you a history, which is very interesting. So don't be afraid to just kind of put your own sort of slant on how you read the picture as well. Repetition of circular shapes on the plates, bowls on the table create rhythm and fluidity. This draws the viewer's eye towards the man preparing the dinner in the background. So, yeah, we've got the repetition, and it kind of, humans like repetition, so our eyes kind of jump in between those circular shapes, which then draws us to the man, like a sort of pathway. Speaking of that, you've got, for example, the knife and fork, they point towards the man. The wood grain is all pointing towards the man. All these subtle little leading lines within the image, which kind of draws our eye from the foreground all the way to the background. Which again, allows us to kind of focus on that man preparing the dinner, which is the impact bit. So, lots of answers there. We can talk about the photographer using a low ISO. This can be seen as there's no noise and grain in the shadows on the right hand side of the cooker. So yeah, if you look at that cooker, there's no grain there, there's no digital noise within that part. This creates a rich black shadow that frames the man in the background. So again, we've got an impact. Okay, you could say it creates a dark shadow. The impact bit is your interpretation of the picture. You don't worry too much about it, just as long as you say what that does. That rich black might make you feel quite sad. It might make you think, the character's really lonely because it's a really dark area and there's connotations of darkness and being alone, and the figure's alone. I think it's a very interesting photo because I think it's kind of like there is happiness and sadness within it. And I think that the title, is kind of alludes to that. The figure looks quite alone, but it looks like a very inviting place. One of the most interesting things about the image, I think, is you feel like you're actually sitting there, and that's due to vantage point. You've also got things like the smoke all coming off the food makes it feel all warm and inviting, and leads to the man. Are you his guest? Yeah, and it kind of, I don't know, I like the image. I think the image is amazing, and it kind of, photography can take you back to particular places, and it reminds me of my papa's kitchen, and it takes me back there, and it's amazing, the type of food as well, and even like, that kind of traditional sort of, meat and two veg kind of thing is important. Everything in there is quite important. The old-fashioned teapot, the condiments on the table all tell us something about that individual. Also the fact that, the clock on the background, which we can't really see the time, is that kind of, the image is all really about time as well. But anyway, I could ramble on about this for ages. I think it's a great picture. But you're looking for 10-point example explained. Read the mark schemes. I find it really useful to read those. Okay, and it gives you a kind of, an idea. I'm even thinking there, you've got one saying that the viewer is sitting at an old-fashioned kitchen table, waiting for an older relative to join him, which is a familiar scene. This evokes a nostalgic feeling of being a child in a loving home. That's kind of what, it's almost like what I just said about my papa. There's like a kind of, you feel you're there sort of thing. So, I hope that this has been useful. I hope that going through the paper in this way has helped. If you're unsure about any of the answers that you gave, if you want to bring them to me and I can have a look and tell you if I would give it a mark or not. But yeah, I hope that you have got something out of the video, and yeah, take care.